Chapter 251. Wilbur was shocked. Dude, seriously. It's not worth it. Betting your life like this. Young man. The three major clans are the leaders of all the clans in Cardin Province. We look up to them greatly. And you're insulting me when you insult them. Dude, you don't have to do this. Calm down, Wilbur said in exasperation. He had not expected the three major clans to be so influential. It made sense, though. The three major clans had a long history spanning hundreds of years, and Jeremy was a peak aura-level cultivator. Despite the fact that this was hardly anything to Wilbur, the aura level was something many cultivators could only dream of achieving. It was considered a big deal to most cultivators if they could even enter the early stages of the aura level. To get even further than that was practically impossible. Yes, to be at peak aura level was quite an achievement. It was understandable that some smaller clans had great respect for the three major clans. But the two siblings were a bit much, and Wilbur just found the whole thing funny. Unfortunately, his words of advice did not convince the siblings much, and they only grew even more agitated. The guy flew to his feet. How dare you? Stand up and show me what you've got. People way more powerful than them are everywhere, my guy. It won't do you any good to worship them like this. Wilbur was getting a little annoyed now as well. You're going to die for saying that. The nerve of this guy. Do you even know where you are? Even the guy's sister was fired up now, glowering at Wilbur. Wilbur did not know what to say. Just then, someone called out from the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the leaders of the three major clans. The siblings heard this and sneered at Wilbur. We'll get you later. They began to applaud along with the crowd after that. Wilbur sighed. Looking in front of him, Jeremy, Matt, and Gerard walked up to the podium. Jeremy was wearing bloody red robes, striking to the eye. Matt and Gerard beside him, radiating an air of authority as well. Jeremy waved a hand and the applause died down. He then looked around the crowd. Wilbur happened to lock eyes with him before looking away. The crowd seemed to sense Jeremy's power, falling completely silent. Jeremy smiled. I invited all of you here because I have big news. He paused before saying, a brilliant elite has appeared in Seacher Town. We dueled against each other a while back, and it was my complete loss. What? The crowd broke out into murmurs at once. Jeremy Owens had lost in a duel? That was impossible. No one in Cardin Province was any match for Jeremy. He also had the clan jewel, a legendary weapon that an ancient cultivator of the Owens clan had left behind. Who had beaten Jeremy? Just then, the siblings next to Wilbur could hardly believe their ears. That's impossible, Mr. Owens. Please tell us who this person is. I'd like to see what he's got. Chapter 252. The crowd turned to see the brother of the two siblings red in the face. Wilbur glanced at him as well. Was there something wrong with this guy? He practically worshipped Jeremy like a god who could do no wrong. Someone piped up as well. Yes, Mr. Owens. Please tell us who he is. We'll show him who's the boss. That was clearly said to butter up to Jeremy. The guy from earlier was just childish and immature. But this guy was a grown adult. Jeremy himself had said that he lost. Did these people think they were going to win? However, more people in the crowd were worried. News like this would usually be kept strictly under wraps. Why was Jeremy declaring it publicly like this? Were things in Cardin Province about to change, and this mystery expert was going to take over the three major clans? That was not entirely impossible. If Jeremy could announce it like this, it was likely that he was going to retire from his position. That was just how the world worked. You were the boss as long as you had the most power, and you would step down once you met your match. Just as everyone was guessing what was going on, Jeremy said, Mr. Penn, come on up since you're here. I'd like everyone to meet the expert who beat me. As he spoke, Jeremy stared straight at Wilbur sitting in the last row. The crowd looked over in shock. The person who beat Jeremy was present. Wilbur's brows furrowed, and he slowly got to his feet. The crowd exclaimed at the sight. This man looked so young. The siblings next to Wilbur were in even more shock. They could not believe that this was the guy who had beaten Jeremy. Another middle-aged man's jaw was on the ground, but his gaze was solemn. He had a feeling something big was going to happen tonight. Wilbur strode up to the podium and everyone scurried out of his way. He looked at Jeremy before saying, "I can't believe you managed to spot me. It looks like you've gotten a lot more skilled." Jeremy laughed heartily. "You're right. I didn't think my skills would get to this level one day. I threw this banquet just for your demise. Prepare to meet your end." "Jeremy, what are you saying? Didn't you tell us that you invited Mr. Penn to have him say a few words to these people?" Matt asked, shocked. Gerard was shocked as well. "Jeremy, don't joke about that. Mr. Penn is an ambience level expert." It was obvious that neither Matt nor Gerard had known about Jeremy's real goal, and they were terrified. Both of them had seen just how powerful Wilbur was. Jeremy had used his clan jewel against him and still lost terribly. How dare Jeremy challenge Wilbur again? He was just digging his own grave. It was important to note that all the members of Matt and Gerard's clans were there along with Jeremy's. If Wilbur was angered, the three major clans might be wiped out. That would only drag other clans down. Was Jeremy out of his mind? Wilbur was just as confused. He frowned at Jeremy. "I really don't know where you got the nerve to say that to me." "You're going to find out real soon," Jeremy said, letting out another string of crazed laughter. "The world's going to know how powerful I am, and I'll never die or lose again. All of you will swim in a sea of your own decay." Jeremy was talking like a madman. Some of the people in the crowd were getting scared, taking a step backward. Wilbur frowned even harder, cursing. "Are you fucking kidding me? This again? Everyone, evacuate the premises right now." The crowd panicked at Wilbur's words, springing into action and running out. "Ha ha ha! Look at you still trying to escape. Do you even know why I called you here?" Chapter 253. Jeremy continued to laugh like a madman, putting his palms together. Territory, sea of blood. All at once, a terrifying surge of spirit energy exploded from Jeremy and surrounded the entire place. A bloody red spirit barrier arose, cutting off the hall from outside. The people who made it to the door collided with the barrier harshly and were sent flying backward as blood sprayed from their mouths. Matt and Gerard were shocked. They retreated away from Jeremy at once, waiting for his next move. Jeremy's power was beyond what they could comprehend. Both Matt and Gerard knew that this was not the Jeremy from before. Despite Jeremy saying that it was Wilbur he was after, Matt and Gerard were in just as much danger as everyone else in the hall. Just then, Wilbur exclaimed, "Sanctuary level? No wonder you were so cocky. You've reached sanctuary level cultivation." That was a level above ambience. Anyone who became a sanctuary level expert would have their own territory of power. The sanctuary level expert would naturally have a certain measure of power as long as they were in said territory, and their power might even increase. Their opponent would lose completely. Anyone in this territory who was at a cultivation level below the sanctuary level had no hope of winning at all. Waves of energy exploded from Jeremy. It was so powerful that everyone else found it hard to breathe. He continued to laugh wildly. "Yes, the sanctuary level. What amazing power I now hold. Do you think you're still a match for me now, Wilbur? I'm pretty sure that power isn't actually yours. Don't get too smug just yet," Wilbur said coldly. Jeremy roared out loud. "This power was God-given, and you can get ready to rot in a sea of blood." At the same time, a bloody red flame lit up around Jeremy, making it look like he was on fire. A terrifying power weighed down the air around them once more, this time emanating the stomach-turning stench of blood and decay. Just then, Wilbur shouted, "Everybody, to the back!" Wilbur's voice was laced with positive spirit energy. The people who had been stuck in a daze from the bloody spirit pressure and odor returned to their senses, crawling to hide behind Wilbur. Jeremy was a terrifying sight, towering over everyone like a demon from hell. The spirit pressure he was radiating made everyone else in the room shiver. They had no choice. Wilbur was their only hope. After all, Wilbur had beaten Jeremy before. Yet looking at Jeremy now, the crowd did not think that Wilbur would be able to beat him again. Everyone watched on in terror, unsure how the situation would play out. After Wilbur cried out, a series of seals appeared between his hands as he shouted again, "Quad Thunder!" The 4 lightning bolts appeared with lightning chains crackling between them, shackling Jeremy down firmly. The crowd gasped in shock. What the hell was that? No wonder he had beaten Jeremy. The two siblings from earlier widened their eyes in surprise. However, Jeremy merely let out a crazed laugh, and the spirit flame around him burned brighter as the quad thunder spell was crushed into nothing. Is that all you've got? Come on now. Show me everything. Jeremy glowered at Wilbur like a demon, clearly not thinking much of Wilbur. Wilbur sneered. He took 2 steps back as his hand formed a series of seals again, then shouted, "Way of Thunder." Chapter 254. A thick ball of lightning shot out from between Wilbur's palms, lashing out in Jeremy's direction. The sight made everyone else's chest lurch. This man was truly something else. What kind of spell was that? At the same time, Jeremy was still laughing like a madman. He merely reached out with a hand, and a shield made from blood appeared before him. There were countless skulls moving around slowly on the blood shield, like a river of death and hell. The Way of Thunder spell struck the shield, but the wriggling blood on the shield ended up absorbing the attack before disappearing altogether. Wilbur's expression was ashen, but Jeremy laughed his head off. Any attack is useless in the face of my blood shield, young man. Do you have anything else? I haven't quite had enough fun yet. I'll let you have all the fun you want then. Wilbur called out loudly, and the seals in his hand multiplied as spirit energy surged outward from him. As he shouted, a dragon made of lightning appeared before him. It crackled and hissed, emanating a terrifying pressure of spirit energy. The Thunder Dragon was only 5 meters long, but the power it held was enough to make the crowd behind stop breathing. Dragon of Thunder. As Wilbur cried out, the Thunder Dragon let out a roar that sounded like thunder as it pounced on Jeremy. Jeremy did not seem scared in the slightest. He laughed again as more spirit energy flowed out of him, increasing the size of his blood shield once again. Boom! The Thunder Dragon collided with the blood shield. Just like last time, the dragon ended up being sucked up by the blood shield without leaving any trace behind. Jeremy continued to laugh. I told you, young man. None of your attacks are going to work. The crowd went pale. Wilbur was powerful. More than anything they had seen. The spells he cast were unlike anything the crowd had even heard of, but Jeremy had deflected all of them with just one blood shield. It could be said that as long as Wilbur did not have anything more powerful up his sleeve, there was no way Jeremy was going to lose. Just then, Wilbur spoke up. Impressive. However, your method of cultivation is evil, and nothing good will come out of it. How dare you, Jeremy howled. The strength that has been given to me is all-powerful, and a low-life like you would never understand it. Prepare to die. As he spoke, a blood sword around 2 meters long appeared in Jeremy's hand. The sword was burning brightly with a bloody red spirit flame, and a powerful spirit pressure seemed to radiate off it in waves that made everyone else tremble. Wilbur smirked. You really fucking think you're a god here, huh? As he spoke, Wilbur opened his right palm as a terrifying wave of spirit energy burst forth once again. Within a split second, a staggeringly huge cleaver appeared in his grasp. The blade of the cleaver was around 1/2 meter wide and 2 meters tall, with the handle itself at 1.5 meters long. The blade was burning brightly with a spirit flame as well, crackling with lightning that boomed with thunderous sound every now and then. Jeremy had already launched his attack, crying out, "It's your honor to die at the blade of blood. Save that for after you take this attack." Wilbur shouted as well, swinging the gigantic cleaver above his head before leaping into the air and chopping down on Jeremy. The sight scared everyone out of their wits. Jeremy's blood sword was terrifying enough, but Wilbur's thunder cleaver seemed even worse. No one could imagine just how terrifying the outcome would be. Wilbur's thunder cleaver struck the blood sword hard. A deafening sound exploded in the air. Both sword and cleaver collided, and a wave of spirit energy exploded outward. It was hard to tell who had the upper hand. Wilbur surrounded Jeremy at the speed of lightning, swinging his cleaver repeatedly. The gigantic cleaver flipped in Wilbur's hands as he swung it with great expertise. Wilbur himself was moving so fast he could hardly be seen by the naked eye. All the crowd could make out was a figure flying circles around Jeremy, waving the terrifying weapon in his hands. Yet Jeremy's powers steadily increased, and he showed no sign of letting up either. The blood sword was somehow able to deflect every attack from Wilbur's thunder cleaver at the last second. The crowd watched on in terror. Wilbur's skills were like that of a god. He was even flipping through the air in ways that defied gravity. The crowd was not able to see what stunts Wilbur was pulling, but what Wilbur was doing was no longer considered stunts anymore. Every single one of his attacks was unpredictable, as if he was just making it up as he went. Wilbur was attacking in a completely unexpected manner, and he was nearly impossible to beat. On top of that, Wilbur also had a terrifying amount of spirit energy. Yet Jeremy was not inferior to Wilbur. He blocked all of Wilbur's vicious attacks with just one blood sword, even managing to counter Wilbur's attacks twice. He was powerful too. However, everyone had forgotten that this duel was happening within Jeremy's territory, and no one would be able to fight back as long as they were in there. The battle lasted a few minutes. Spirit energy surged out in rampant waves. All of a sudden, Jeremy seemed to grow impatient. He let out a howl, the flames on his blood sword growing as he swung it in Wilbur's direction. A terrifying wave of sword energy came swinging toward Wilbur. The sword energy held an impossibly powerful spirit pressure, burning through the air in blazing waves as if it was out to destroy everything. The crowd exclaimed in shock. That attack alone was probably enough to raise a mountain. Wilbur cried out as well, the spirit flame on his thunder cleaver crackling with lightning. He leaped into the air and charged toward Jeremy. The thunder cleaver in Wilbur's grasp was brought down upon the sword. The all-encompassing sword energy from the blood sword was decimated by the thunder cleaver just like that. Wilbur did not slow down, soaring up to Jeremy and running in circles around him as he struck with his thunder cleaver many times. Finally, Wilbur stopped and stood in front of Jeremy coldly with the thunder cleaver in his hands. Just then, more than 10 ghastly wounds had appeared on Jeremy with blood gushing out of them. The crowd heaved a sigh of relief at this. There was no way Jeremy was going to recover from this. Yet Jeremy let out a peal of laughter, letting the blood flow as he stared right at Wilbur. You're powerful and skilled, and I admit you're one of the best I've ever seen. I'm no match for you. I'm glad you know it, Wilbur said coldly. Jeremy continued with a howl. But don't you forget that this power was given to me by the gods, and a lowlife like you will never beat me. The crowd wondered silently. Jeremy was already terribly injured. What else could he still have up his sleeve? Just then, Jeremy cried out wildly, blood for the blood god, skull for the skull throne. Chapter 255. As he shouted, the territory containing his sea of blood lit up. At the same time, the blood that had flowed out of him started flowing back into his body in reverse. His wounds began to heal at lightning speed as well. The crowd was at a loss for words. What kind of power did he have to be able to do this? At that moment, it seemed as though Jeremy was actually incapable of dying or suffering from harm. No one dared to imagine just how Jeremy was going to treat them once he had taken down Wilbur. Nothing good could come out of that. Wilbur squinted at Jeremy. Tell me how you got this power. Jeremy laughed like a madman. I was given this power by the blood god, and I'm who the blood god has chosen. You're all dead. Jeremy raised his hands, and a terrifying surge of spirit energy exploded from him. The crowd gasped in pain, feeling like there were knives cutting into their body. They looked down and were greeted with a terrifying sight. Several wounds had split open on different parts of their body, oozing blood that flowed toward Jeremy. Jeremy stood tall like a beacon for their blood, all of it flowing and floating over to him as he absorbed it. The spirit energy in his body began to grow at an alarming rate, bearing down on everyone within the territory. Those who were cultivators of higher levels were able to use their powers to slow down the blood draining out of their bodies, but the amateurs were just helplessly drained. Matt was channeling his spirit energy in defense while shouting, "Save us, Mr. Penn! Jeremy Owens tricked all of us. Please save us, Mr. Penn, or he's going to feed on all of our flesh and blood to make himself more powerful," Gerard shouted as well. The both of them had finally understood why Jeremy had invited so many people here tonight. His real goal had been to drain them of their blood, flesh, and life to increase his power in his battle against Wilbur. The crowd was merely a sacrifice, Only Wilbur could save them now. Wilbur frowned. He was just about to ask where Jeremy actually got his strength that made him unable to die or lose. But now it was clear he had to strike before it was too late. Jeremy Owens, I don't care where you got your strength, but you're about to see God real soon. Wilbur did not hold back anymore. He put the thunder cleaver away, placed his palms together, and shouted, "Holy wave of thunder." The next second, the clouds above Jeremy gathered and formed a low-ranging dark cloud about 12 meters wide. The dark cloud rumbled loudly with a gigantic wave of thunder brewing inside. The crowd's faces paled as they sensed just how powerful the dark cloud was. Yet Jeremy was still laughing maniacally. "I told you all attacks will be useless against me." As he spoke, a large amount of bloody red spirit energy gushed out of Jeremy and formed a huge blood shield above his head. Doing that seemed to have forced him to stop absorbing the crowd's blood. Right on cue, countless bolts of lightning struck the blood shield. Waves of lightning bolts hit the blood shield but were fully absorbed by it the next second. The crowd's gaze flashed with hopelessness at the sight. Wilbur, however, smirked coldly. "Don't get too smug. I've got a show for you coming right up." Chapter 256. As he spoke, the thunder cleaver appeared in Wilbur's hands again, crackling with sparks of lightning. Wilbur shot toward Jeremy at the speed of light, running in circles around Jeremy once again, pummeling him in a shower of attacks. Jeremy was currently using the blood shield above his head to defend against the waves of lightning bolts while he wielded the blood sword in his other hand. There was no sign of him letting up. Around the pair's battle, lightning struck, and blood sprayed the air as waves of spirit energy exploded every second. The sight looked like hell on earth, and everyone else hid themselves in fear. The terrifying duel lasted a few minutes until Jeremy seemed to be running out of stamina. "You lowlife. How dare you challenge the power of the blood god? Come on. You can do better than yelling insults at me just because you're losing." Wilbur shouted challengingly, continuing his assault on Jeremy. Jeremy seemed to have lost his mind completely just then, letting out a series of crazed howls as he stopped deflecting. Instead, he launched a series of attacks against Wilbur. Wilbur scoffed coldly. He dodged all of Jeremy's attacks at lightning speed while swinging the thunder cleaver at his opponent even harder. All at once, several more wounds appeared on Jeremy's body. Jeremy was not scared in the slightest, only growing even more crazed. The blood sword in his grasp disappeared amidst his laughter, and he reached out toward Wilbur with both hands. "Blood wrath." Jeremy practically screamed the words, and powerful energy shot up that held Wilbur down and sealed his movements. Wilbur could feel the blood in his body starting to move as if trying to escape from his body. "Fuck! You actually did better." Wilbur did not panic in the face of Jeremy's terrifying power, merely cursing at him in annoyance. At the same time, the dragon's head on his back lit up as a surge of powerful energy burst forth from his body. He was free from Jeremy's blood wrath at once, whipping the thunder cleaver above his head like a helicopter propeller as he lunged at Jeremy once again. Jeremy seemed to have used up all his skills, unable to take on Wilbur's attacks. Countless wounds appeared on Jeremy's body once again as blood gushed out of those openings. However, Jeremy was still in a feral state. He let out a howl as a fog of blood appeared around him. He began to grow in size, turning into a bloody giant standing 3 to 4 meters tall. A terrifying amount of spirit energy came off his body in waves, making a beeline for Wilbur. Wilbur sneered, the dragon's head on his back lit up once again, and the thunder cleaver lit up with a bright flame. "Infernal fatality." Wilbur uttered the words, raising the cleaver high above his head and bringing it down hard. The thunder cleaver lit up at once with a new white spirit flame alongside the red energy flame, forming a terrifying flame attack that shot in Jeremy's direction. The flame attack came down hard on Jeremy's body, letting out a deafening sound. The terrifying-looking blood giant Jeremy had morphed into shattered under the attack, with pieces of flesh turning to ash under the pressure of the cleaver's blade. All that was left were some charred bones that fell onto the ground with a thunk. At the same time, a piece of coagulated blood about the size of an egg fell on top of the bones. The crowd was finally out of danger. If Jeremy was still able to revive himself from this state, he would truly be a god. Wilbur's holy wave of thunder and the blood shield disappeared as well, and he put the thunder cleaver away. Chapter 257. Wilbur put his hands behind his back after he was done, standing there silently. Everyone else, however, looked at him like he was a deity who had descended upon them. At the same time, the barrier from the sea of blood had disappeared and the crowd was no longer trapped. Many people collapsed at that, some of them having lost too much blood and some dying altogether. Only the aura-level cultivators with a certain amount of skills were still standing. Yet regardless of if they were lying down or standing, everyone paid their respect in unison toward Wilbur. This man had saved all of their lives, and they were expressing their gratitude for that. Wilbur looked at the crowd around him, letting out a sigh. Jeremy's newfound power did make him incredibly strong. Wilbur even had to use the dragon on his back to beat him. Thankfully, Jeremy was taken down before he could usurp the hundreds of lives here. Had Wilbur not acted in time, Jeremy would have gotten unthinkably powerful. Wilbur squatted in front of Jeremy's charred bones, furrowing his brows at the egg-sized blood clot. It had fallen out of Jeremy's body just now and was still wriggling softly. It was clear that even Wilbur's terrifying attack from earlier had not been enough to take it down. The blood clot held a terrifying amount of energy, even trying to enter Wilbur's body and mind when he got close to it. Thankfully, Wilbur was practicing the dragon's chant, a cultivation method from the ancient Dragon Clan. The Dragon Clan was one of the most powerful of its time, with its cultivators holding an immense amount of strength and spirit energy in them like no other. Despite Wilbur not being able to spread the name of the Dragon Clan, he had still inherited enough of the Dragon Clan's specialties, so the blood clot's attempt to attack his spirit was picked up at once. He grabbed the clot and threw it into his demiplane at once. He could get back to that later when he had the time. Just then, Matt and Gerard walked over. Both of them now looked impossibly weak. They bowed to Wilbur deeply. "Thank you for saving our lives, sir. We were all fooled by Jeremy Owens. We did not know his real intentions." "I know that. Do you think you would even be alive otherwise?" The two men lowered their heads in shame, not daring to say anything else. No one would be able to stop Wilbur even if he wanted to kill everyone here. Just then, all the people who could still move bowed to Wilbur as well. Wilbur glanced at them before saying to Matt and Gerard, "Let them recover first. Also, I did actually have something to say today." "Please go ahead, sir," Matt and Gerard scrambled to say. Wilbur fell silent for a beat, before saying, "All cultivators of Seachertown are banned from private duels and battles. This is both a warning and also an order." "Yes, sir." Matt, Gerard, and the other survivors in the crowd bowed in acknowledgement. Wilbur was their king now, and no one could go against him. At the same time, a woman dressed in red let out a shrill peal of laughter, taking in the sight of the Owens Manor through a mirror forged from blood. Such powerful spirit energy. "I like it. Are you ready, Wilbur Penn?" Wilbur faced the crowd as he spoke. "Battling against each other will only result in injury and death. Cultivation is hard enough as it is, and we'll all be much better off this way." Wilbur had seen too many people die since he was just the leader of the Abyss mercenaries and had a good amount of blood on his hands. That was exactly why he did not wish to fight and kill anymore upon returning to Seachertown. He had wanted to say those words to Jeremy from the start, but Jeremy was in too deep to be saved. Wilbur looked at the dead bodies in the crowd and let out a sigh. Some of those people were from the Owens clan, and Jeremy had done all of this without even thinking of them. The Skull Cult was undoubtedly responsible. Something had to be done about the Skull Cult soon. At the thought, Wilbur said to Matt and Gerard, "Take care of everyone here. I'll be on my way now. I have other matters to take care of." Wilbur left after that, and everyone sent him off dutifully. After he was gone, Matt and Gerard exchanged a glance. "Let's heal these people first," Matt said. Gerard nodded. "I have an idea. We can all talk about it once we've healed everyone here." It was past 10 when Wilbur returned to Sea Lake Island. After some thought, he headed right over to the Department of Paranormal Research and Defense Headquarters. Ryder was sitting in front of his computer, seemingly busy with something. "Deacon," Ryder got to his feet at the sight of Wilbur, bowing to him. Wilbur nodded with a frown. "Do we really not have the slightest bit of information on this Skull Cult?" "Sir, You should ask your personal handler about information-related things, someone said. Wilbur sighed. His handler had said there was no information on the Skull Cult either. Was there really no way out of this? He sighed again. All right. You can get back to what you were doing. Wilbur returned to his room after that, entering his demoplane. The blood clot was still lying there silently. It seemed to sense the spirit energy around it, wriggling at top speed all of a sudden as an overwhelming spirit energy shot out and began to try to usurp Wilbur's consciousness. Wilbur smirked coldly, channeling his immense spirit energy back into the blood clot at full force. The blood clot wriggled furiously, its own spirit energy colliding with Wilbur's. All of a sudden, Wilbur let out a loud cry as his spirit energy turned silver and filled the blood clot, making it emit a silver glow. At the same time, a thin red line appeared from the blood clot. It seemed to be pointing somewhere. A coordinate immediately showed up in Wilbur's subconscious. He had just begun marking the coordinate when the red line was cut off. The blood clot stopped moving, and Wilbur retracted his spirit energy as well. Let's see how far you can run from me. Wilbur smiled. The red line was someone else trying to form an untraceable connection between the blood clot and the person channeling their spirit energy into the blood clot. However, Wilbur's powerful spirit energy was enough to force the connection to show itself in the form of a coordinate that Wilbur had managed to mark down. He figured that the coordinate probably led to the headquarters of the Skull Cult. Wilbur also understood a bit more about the blood clot from this. The blood clot held a mysterious spirit power that was immensely powerful. Jeremy's power had come from this as well. Wilbur mumbled to himself, "Coming after me, we'll see how that goes." Chapter 260. Wilbur then hurled the blood clot into the dragon's altar. A surge of aura arose, and the blood clot turned into grace points at once. Wilbur smiled at the sight of the 300 new grace points in the golden hourglass. He traded this for a marrow cleansing pill and a strong will pill. There were not many grace points left after that. Wilbur sighed. There were so many treasures, but grace points were so hard to come by. Every time he had any to add, he felt like what he got in return was always so little. He let out a self-deprecating laugh at this. If the contributions to the altar were so easy to come by and the grace points could be exchanged that easily, Wilbur would be ruling the world in no time. Good things never come easy. Exiting the demoplane, Wilbur collected his thoughts and went to bed. He had something big to do the next day. The next morning, Wilbur got ready and came out of his room to see Charles waiting for him. "Is something the matter?" Wilbur asked. Charles was just the head of management here and was usually at the front desk. He hardly ever came to Wilbur for anything else. Charles said at once, "Apologies, sir. A few people tried entering the place by force just now. I didn't physically stop them so I wouldn't cause you any trouble. What would you like to do with them?" "Who are these people?" "I don't know. I asked them, and they told me they don't know you either." "Why would they want to come inside?" "They said this was public property and insisted on coming in to have some fun. I told them the place was privately owned now, but they refused to listen." Wilbur pondered briefly. "If that's the case, tell them nicely to leave at once. It's not appropriate for them to be here." Wilbur did not really think that a few tourists would be a big deal. It was just that there were all kinds of people who were now living on the island. If any of these intruders were to run into people like Elsa and try to act tough, they were going to have a hard time. Charles nodded and turned to leave. Wilbur went to his office after that. Of course, Ryder was already there. Wilbur asked, "What are you busy with? You're on that computer all the time, waiting for an order." Ryder's face was devoid of emotion. Wilbur was speechless. "I've got an order for you right now." "Please go ahead, Deacon Penn." Ryder got to his feet with a bow. Wilbur put on an air of authority. "I've found a location suspected to be the Skull Cult's headquarters, and I'm ordering you to go check out the place with me." "Of course," Ryder called out in response, lifting up his briefcase at once. Wilbur chuckled, walking out with Ryder. Just as they reached a square, they ran into Charles having a roaring argument with 3 men and 2 women. The group was surrounding Charles, shoving him around. It looked like they might even get violent. Wilbur frowned. "What's happening here?" Charles hurried up to Wilbur at once. "Sir, They're not listening to me and refusing to leave no matter what. Wilbur observed the party of 5. The 3 men and 2 women looked to be in their 20s. They were dressed head to toe in designer clothing, and it was clear they came from affluent backgrounds. Wilbur frowned. Guys, this place is private property. I'm afraid you can't be here. Like hell it is. I was just here last month, and it was open to the public. I even stayed here for 2 nights. Do you think I'm an idiot? One of the men with ash-gray hair shouted in protest at once. Wilbur's expression darkened. Watch your tone, or I'll kick you out. Oh ho! Another short-haired man said in a mocking tone. Do you know who you're talking to? Are you trying to get yourself kicked out of Seacher Town, talking to him like that?